the light coming through the hospital window, was the particular flat gray of January in Ontario. The kind that makes you forget there was ever a sun to begin with. My mouth tasted like old copper, and for a moment I didn't know which day it was, or why my left hip was sending signals through my body that my brain wasn't prepared to receive. Then it came back. The parking lot behind my building. The way my foot went one direction, and the rest of me went another. The sound my hip made when I met the pavement. A sound I am still not able to describe without my stomach turning over. My name is Margot. I am 31 years old. I live in a condo in Mississauga that I bought on my own. I work as a pharmacist at a hospital not far from there, and 6 weeks before I fractured my hip on a patch of black ice, my partner of 4 years had proposed to me on a Sunday morning in our kitchen, while pancakes burned on the stove. He had given me his late mother's engagement ring. She had passed 3 years before we met, and the ring had sat in a wooden box in his dresser drawer the entire time we had been together, waiting, I suppose, for the right moment to become someone else's. It was white gold with a small oval sapphire at the center and 2 tiny diamonds flanking it. Not a large ring, not flashy, the kind of ring that jewelers ask about because they recognize old craftsmanship when they see it. It had been appraised at just over $17,000 CAD, though he had never mentioned that number to me. I found out later, from paperwork I wish I had never needed to read. The morning I woke up in Trillium Health Partners, 3 days after surgery to pin my fractured femoral neck, the first thing I did was reach for the ring on the chain around my neck. I wore it on a chain when I worked because hospital work and rings don't mix well. My fingers found the chain. The chain was there. The ring was not. I told myself it was in a labeled bag somewhere, that a nurse had removed it before surgery the way they always do, and it was sitting in the personal effects envelope waiting for me. I pressed the call button, and the nurse who came in was kind and thorough. She checked the envelope twice. Inside were my earrings, my watch, my phone, and $40 in cash. No ring. Sometimes family members hold on to valuables for safekeeping, she said gently. Did anyone visit in the first day or two? My mother had been the first person through the door after my partner. She had stayed 2 full days while I was still in the fog of anesthetic, sitting in the chair beside my bed, holding my hand, telling me everything was going to be fine. I had trusted that completely, the way you trust things before you understand what trust actually costs. When she came in that afternoon, carrying 2 Tim Hortons coffees and a get-well card from the hospital gift shop, I noticed before she even sat down that she wouldn't look at me directly. My mother has a face that has never once successfully concealed anything. She has a tell. She arranges her features into something meant to look calm, and it comes out looking like someone who has been rehearsing a speech in the car. "Where's the ring?" I asked. She set the coffees down very carefully. "You've been through so much, sweetheart. Let's just focus on how you're feeling." "Mum," my voice was quieter than I meant it to be. "Where is it?" She sat down, spent a long moment studying the lid on her coffee. Then she said something that still sounds wrong to me when I replay it, the way a sentence sounds when it's been assembled correctly, but belongs to no human logic I can recognize as. She said there had been some expenses connected to my hospital stay, that OHIP didn't cover everything, that she and my father had needed to move quickly, and hadn't wanted me waking up to that kind of stress. "You sold it," I said, without a question mark because I already knew. She looked up. "We were going to replace it. We planned to tell you." "You sold his mother's ring." What followed was the particular silence of a room where monitoring equipment fills every pause. Then she said something I had not prepared myself for, even though I should have been, because I had spent 31 years in this family. "It wasn't only for your expenses." She smoothed her sleeve, slowly, one of her habits. "Your brother's dinner is happening in 3 weeks. The deposit for the private room came due, and the money we'd set aside wasn't enough anymore, and the caterers were already booked, and we just thought." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so wrong it tripped over the circuitry for grief and came out the other side as a sound I didn't recognize as my own. My brother was turning 26 at the end of February, and for the better part of the past year I had watched our parents quietly lose their minds over how to fund the celebration he wanted. A private room at a restaurant in Port Credit, DJ, open bar, a custom cake from a bakery in Oakville that specialized in desserts that cost more than my monthly hydro bill. The total had crept up somewhere past $13,000, and I had watched my parents chip away at their line of credit with a particular kind of quiet determination I knew well, because I had watched them deploy it for him his entire life. I had never imagined the solution would involve his mother's ring. The private room upgrade isn't covered, and your physiotherapy won't be either. My mother started again. That ring is not yours, I said. My voice had steadied itself somewhere in the last 30 seconds, and I was grateful for that. It belonged to his family. He kept it in a box in his dresser for 3 years because giving it to the wrong person felt like a betrayal, and he gave it to me because he trusted me with it. This is not a piece of costume jewelry. His mother wore it for 22 years. She began crying. I have spent a long time learning to distinguish between my mother's grief and my mother's strategy, and this was the second kind. The kind that surfaces exactly when a conversation has arrived somewhere she can no longer navigate. I know that crying face. I grew up softening when I saw it, stepping back, making room, letting the hook off. Every piece of muscle memory I had said do it again, be reasonable, give her a way out. I didn't. The door opened, and my partner came in carrying a paper bag from the Persian place near the hospital, because the floor food had been making me feel worse. He looked at me, looked at my mother, looked at my hands. He set the bag on the windowsill without a word. What happened? Very quiet, very even. The register he uses when he's already arrived at a feeling and is waiting for the details to confirm it. I showed him my bare hand. I couldn't say the words yet. He understood. I asked to be alone. That night, listening to the wings settle into its nighttime rhythm, I thought about the Sunday morning he had proposed. The smoke detector had gone off. He had gone down on one knee on the kitchen tile, and his hands were shaking badly enough that he dropped the wooden box before he got it open. He told me his mother had saved up to buy that ring herself in the mid-80s, before they had any money, because she wanted something that was hers and not given to her. She had worn it for 22 years before she got sick. He had kept it, because letting it go to the wrong person would have felt like a betrayal of her, and giving it to me felt, he said, like the first decision in a long time that made complete sense. It had survived 22 years on her hand. It had not survived 2 days in my parents' house. I want to be honest about what I understood in that hospital bed, in the flat January dark, because this moment was not the beginning of anything. It was just the first time I could see the whole picture at once. My brother is 5 years younger than me, and he has always been, without cruelty and without anyone consciously choosing it, the reason the room rearranges itself. When I graduated from the University of Toronto's pharmacy program with distinction, having worked at the hospital pharmacy for 2 years alongside my studies to cover what OSAP didn't, my parents showed up to convocation 40 minutes late because my brother's car had been towed that morning and he needed help sorting it out. By the time they arrived, I was already at the post-ceremony reception. My mother apologized for months. The story my relatives told at Christmas that year was about how stressful that towing situation had been. When I got my pharmacist license and my first staff position, my father's first response was, "That's wonderful, honey. Your brother is writing his entrance exams next week. Keep your fingers crossed for him." I kept my fingers crossed. That is the thing that used to confuse me and doesn't anymore. I was never angry at my brother. He is not a bad person. He is a person who was handed a particular understanding of how much space he was allowed to occupy, and he occupied it, because why would he do anything different? I was the one who didn't need things, the one who figured it out, the one who had learned at some early and unnamed point that asking meant competing for attention I was not going to win, so it was better not to ask. Somewhere along the way, doesn't need much, became a license to take without asking. That evening I heard my partner's voice in the hallway outside my room, speaking to my father, who had arrived near the end of visiting hours with supermarket flowers and an expression I recognized as the one he wore when he wanted things to be over without having to say much. I couldn't make out every word. I heard enough. I heard my partner say, either the ring is back on her finger where it belongs or it isn't. My father said something muffled, something about making it right, eventually. I lay in the dark and cried quietly, the way I had taught myself to do so that no one would feel obligated to respond. Not only because of the ring, because I finally understood, in a way I couldn't walk back from, where I ranked in the structure of my own family. Below a private room booking in Port Credit. Below a custom cake. Below the feelings of people who weren't in hospital. I was discharged 5 days after surgery with a walker, a follow-up at the fracture clinic in 6 weeks, and a clean break in my trust that no brace was going to fix. I stayed at my parents' house for the first 2 weeks of recovery, because my condo had a slippery tub, and the retrofitting my partner and I had been meaning to do hadn't happened yet. Every day there was strange in the way that going back to a place you can now see clearly is always strange. My mother was on the phone with the caterer, with a party supply company, with someone who did balloon installations. She talked about the party the way she talked about the most important work of her life. Not once in any of those conversations was there a mention of her daughter, who had spent 5 days in a hospital bed 2 weeks earlier. I found my father in the kitchen one evening and asked him the question I had been shaping since the hospital. Why didn't you ask me? That's all I keep coming back to. Just ask. He held his mug with both hands. The venue deposit came due the same day you went into surgery. There wasn't time. There was time the week before. There was time the month before. And if there wasn't time, you could have canceled. We were committed. The invitations were already sent. Your uncle was flying in from Calgary. More humiliating than selling your daughter's ring while she was in hospital? He set his mug down. Said, "You were not in surgery the entire time, Margot," which was the least reassuring possible response to that question. That's not the point. The point, he said, and his voice rose slightly, the way it always did when he decided the conversation had gone far enough in a direction he didn't like, is that this family takes care of each other. And you have always been capable. You have never needed us to worry about you the way he does. That has always been something to be proud of. There it was, said plainly, like it was a point in my favor. I had been so capable, so self-sufficient, so reliably unfailing, that I had been extended the consideration one extends to a piece of furniture rather than a person. I had been punished for not falling apart. My mother appeared in the doorway with her arms crossed. You're making this into something it doesn't need to be. We'll pay you back. These things take time. I went back to the room I had slept in for 18 years and sat on the edge of the bed and felt something I hadn't felt since the accident. Not grief. Grief had been there all along, underneath. This was quieter. This felt like knowing the shape of a thing completely, after a very long time of only feeling its edges in the dark. That night my partner left without saying goodbye to my parents and texted me from the driveway. Give me a few days. I have an idea. Trust me. I did. I always had. What I didn't know yet was that my partner had found a business card 3 days earlier. He had gone to my parents' house to pick up my medications and some things I needed, and my father's winter coat was hanging by the door. He patted the pocket looking for a pen. The card was from a shop in Kensington Market that specialized in vintage and estate jewelry. He went the next morning. He described the ring. White gold, oval sapphire, 2 flanking diamonds, a date engraved on the inside of the band from 1986. The owner's face changed. She said she had it in the back, that she had set it aside from the display, because she knew when a ring like that came through the door, that something had gone badly wrong somewhere, and she hadn't been sure she wanted to sell it to a stranger. He paid the full asking price, more than what my parents had received for it. He used money earmarked for our wedding venue deposit. He did not tell me any of this until the ring was already back in the wooden box. Meanwhile, I had started doing something I had never allowed myself to do before. I started writing things down. Every significant financial moment I could recall. The car my parents bought my brother at 19 when his was written off. The 3 periods between 2018 and 2022 when they had quietly covered his rent. What had just happened. Dates. Amounts. The pattern that had always been there invisible because I had never held still long enough to look at it directly. I called a friend from university who had completed her paralegal certificate and was working at a firm in Etobicoke. We met at a cafe on Lakeshore, and I laid everything out for her the way you describe something that happened to someone else when you're not ready to feel it as your own. She stirred her coffee slowly. If the ring was a gift specifically to you, she said, and not jointly held property, then what they did has a name. Conversion. Technically theft under property law. It doesn't stop being that because they're your parents. I sat with that for a long moment. I hadn't come to her looking for legal action. I had come to understand the shape of what had been done to me, but hearing it named plainly, without apology, cracked open something I had been carefully holding shut. I'm not trying to destroy anyone, I said. I know, she said. But you deserve to understand exactly what happened to you and what you're allowed to do about it. That part is yours. The 3 weeks leading up to my brother's party were some of the strangest I've lived. On the surface, everything stayed polite. I attended a second venue consultation with my mother. I smiled in the specific way I had spent years learning to manufacture, the kind that goes just below the eyes and fools almost everyone. Underneath that, my friend and I had been quietly building a formal record. The ring's appraisal documents. A written statement from my partner confirming it had been given to me as a specific personal gift. A dated written account of my hospital conversation with my mother, detailed while the memory was still tight. Financial records reaching back several years. My friend drafted a letter, clear, quiet, factual. It named what had happened, what the ring was worth, and what reasonable restitution looked like. It was the most professional document I had ever had written on my behalf, and also the most heartbreaking. One evening, while I was doing my home physio exercises on the living room floor, my partner came and sat beside me and slid something across the hardwood, the wooden box. I opened it. The ring, the sapphire, the 2 small diamonds, the engraved date inside the band. I slid it back onto my finger and couldn't speak for a long time. He sat with me on the floor while I cried, the kind of crying that happens when relief and grief and gratitude all arrive together, and the body doesn't know which direction to go. You didn't have to do that, I finally said. I know. He didn't say anything else, he didn't need to. That night I made a decision. I was going to the party, not to make a scene, not to scream across the table, not to make my brother's evening about me. I was going because I wanted my parents just once to receive something without warning, the same courtesy they had extended to me. My friend arranged for the formal letter to be delivered by courier to the restaurant during the event, timed to arrive in the thick of the evening. She had professional contacts. She told me not to worry about the timing. I wore a dark green dress. The ring was on my finger. I hugged my brother at the door, handed him a gift I had picked out 2 months earlier, and meant every word of happy birthday. This was never about him. He had been shaped by something he hadn't asked to be shaped by, and I had never stopped knowing the difference. The courier arrived at 8:30, between the main course and dessert, when the room was loud and warm, and my parents had finally relaxed enough to believe the evening was going to end cleanly. My father went to the door of the private room, expecting a late delivery of something for the catering staff. He signed for the envelope with a pen from his jacket, and opened it right there in the doorway, still half turned toward the conversation he'd stepped away from. I watched his face move through confusion, then recognition, then something I can only describe as a slow collapse. He folded the paper quickly, too quickly. My mother noticed his expression from across the room and came to him. My Aunt Lorraine, who has always been constitutionally incapable of ignoring anything that looks interesting, leaned over from the adjacent table. She caught the letterhead before he could get the envelope closed. Her eyes moved from the paper to my hand to my parents' faces. She said, in a voice at least 1 glass of wine louder than she intended, "Is that from a jewelry dealer?" No one answered. She looked between my parents and me, standing by the dessert table with the ring catching the light. "What is going on?" The room didn't go entirely silent, but that corner of it did. The people nearest us had stopped moving, the way people do at every family gathering, when something real surfaces and everyone decides simultaneously to pretend they can't hear it while hearing every word. My parents pulled me into the small corridor off the private room. My mother's voice was somewhere between pleading and fury. "Tonight, Margot? Here? In front of everyone?" "I waited 3 weeks," I said. My voice was steady in a way that surprised even me. "I waited while you finalized the dessert menu and confirmed the DJ and told everyone you knew how excited you were. I waited while you didn't ask once whether my hip was healing, or whether the physiotherapy was going well, or whether I was sleeping. I'm done waiting for a version of you that considers me." My father tried. Something about family, about not having intended for it to go this way, about how they had always done what was best for everyone. My brother appeared in the doorway then, still holding his glass. He looked at me, then at our parents, then at the ring on my finger, the one he had seen in a bowl on the kitchen counter 3 weeks ago and been told by our mother to say nothing about. He said quietly, "I should have said something." Not an apology, not exactly, but more honesty than I had heard from anyone in that family in a very long time, and I appreciated it more than he probably realized. My father tried once more. I let him finish. Then I said what I had spent 3 weeks arriving at without knowing I was headed there. "This was never about the money," I told them. "You can write me a check tomorrow, and none of what this showed me will change. I have spent 31 years being the one who doesn't need things, And somewhere along the way I think I started to believe that if I needed less, you would notice more. That's not how this works. You sold that ring because you knew I would survive it, and the alternative would inconvenience someone else. I need you to sit with that. Because I have been sitting with everything else for a very long time. I picked up my coat. I said goodnight to my brother. I walked out through the room without looking back. The weeks after that were not clean. Real things rarely are. My father called 4 days later. He didn't make excuses. He said, I was wrong. He came to my condo on a Thursday evening, alone, sat at my kitchen table, and placed a check on the surface for the full appraised value of the ring. I had not asked him to. He said he understood, it didn't fix anything, and that it was the only concrete place he knew how to start. My mother's apology came later, and carried more conditions. She wanted me to understand the pressure she had been under. I listened to everything she said. I told her I understood that she was doing her best, and that her best had not been enough. I said it without anger and without softening it, and I meant both. My brother and I talked alone, at a coffee shop on a Tuesday in March, the kind of gray bright March day when it finally looks like winter might actually end. He said he had known for a long time that things had not been fair, and hadn't found a way to say it. He said he wanted to do better. Whether that will hold, I genuinely don't know yet. Time will tell those things. My partner and I are planning our wedding. The ring is on my finger every day, and it means something different now than it did the morning he put it there. Not less, more. Because I know what it survived. I know who went looking for it. I know what it cost him to bring it back, and that he did it without hesitation, and that he never once asked me to be grateful. There are mornings, in the particular light that comes through the bedroom window differently in March than in January, when I look at it and think about his mother. 22 years she wore it. She brought it through everything her life asked of her. It was nearly lost, and it wasn't, because someone decided it was worth finding. Setting a boundary doesn't sound the way people think it will. It isn't loud, it's very quiet. It's saying to the people who raised you, I am not the member of this family who absorbs the cost of everyone else's choices. I am not less valuable because I require less management. I am here, fully, the same as everyone else, and I will be treated that way, or I will stop showing up for the things that matter to you. If you stayed with me through all of this, thank you. I know it was a lot. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. I always love knowing where these stories reach. And if anything here felt familiar, I hope you know you're not alone in it.